Hi, good afternoon, everybody who's joined the workshop today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emma Beasley and I work with Emirates HR. We're very fortunate to have Sarah with us today, who's going to be taking us through some CV writing guidance for what's going to be about the next hour. So she's going to be able to provide you with some practical tools and insights into how to make the perfect CV in what is quite a difficult, perhaps, environment at the moment for careers and for recruitment. The software that we're using, Demio, doesn't actually allow for you to be able to talk up easily. So what we've decided is that we will use the chat box, but Sarah will take you through sort of when to ask questions, when is an ideal timing to ask questions. So I will hand over to Sarah and she can introduce herself and then take it forward from there. I hope you enjoy it and you gain a lot from this, and then I will catch up with you at the end. Okay, welcome Sarah. If you'd introduce yourself now, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my workshop on CV writing, constructing your personal marketing tool. I am British, as you can tell from the accent, and I've been in the Middle East for about 14 years and have been working in HR and training as a specialization for the last 20 years of my career. I have, as I'm sure you can appreciate, over the years done countless interviews and screened many hundreds and thousands, possibly tens of thousands of CVs. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of CVs and formats and inclusions, exclusions, and what have you over the years. Now, at the moment, and sorry to use the buzzwords for the time, but we are in unprecedented times with the COVID situation. And it means that a lot of us are out of work, having been our positions been made redundant from whichever company that we've been working for. I include myself in that. I'm currently redundant as well, and looking for a new position. I have some irons in the fire, but this is where I've also refreshed my knowledge and my skills with regards to my CV after making a normal number of attempts to achieve interviews and a foothold in a recruitment process for a position and not being successful. I basically went back and revisited my entire CV and looked at the current trends on writing a CV to make myself stand out in the crowd. One of the things we need to remember at the moment is that there are hundreds of thousands of people who are out of work and looking for jobs, and the number of jobs that are available are few and far between. I've had a little bit of experience in the last few months of being on the recruitment side of the table with helping some of my ex-colleagues with recruitment needs that they have and gathering CVs. This has led me to understand the depth of the workforce that's out there and the quality of people that are looking for jobs, but also the challenges that recruiters face in trying to find the right candidates. If you go and try and pick, and imagine this, you are stood in the middle of, for those who are in Dubai, Ski Dubai, and for those who are not, a big snowfall area, and try and pick just one of the best of the snowflakes that you can find in a pile of snow, it's extremely difficult. And this is what recruiters are facing. They have upwards of 300 to 400 CVs for a small job, and for other jobs where there are more general sort of hospitality positions in particular, which is an area of my specialization, you're looking at upwards of 1,000 CVs that are received for a waiter or waitress type position. This means that from a recruiter perspective, you've got hundreds of people to screen through, and you've got to have a really good selection tool to be able to screen those candidates, and you really are looking for the brightest and the best. You can pick the good cherries from the top of the tree. So don't be disheartened when you are applying for jobs and not being selected for interview, because your time will come. I'm confident of that, but also you have to understand the volume of people that are applying and the people that you're up against. And this is one of the reasons that I worked to put together this presentation and this workshop, so that you can make your CV the best that's possibly can be, and for it to be your marketing tool. So what are we going to cover today? It's very difficult for me to pick and to condense everything into an hour, and I'm hoping we'll fill the hour with everything here. But CVs are such a massive topic to go through, and there's a lot of information out there on the internet about, and lots of opinion over what CV is the best and what format and how and where, and you can do various training sessions to and workshops and what have you to learn. I'm not saying mine is the best. I don't necessarily have anything, but this is based on my experience from an old school candidate. I'm back in the day before email and online applications were, as well as current trends and current times, and the new software that we're using at the moment, the applicant tracking systems that are being used, and with the current pandemic situation for recruitment. Okay, these are some basic and common sense hints and tips and structural information and guidelines for you. Okay, so we'll cover CV formats, what to put where, how and why we should put these things in. I'm going to address the issue of a subconscious bias. Okay, I shall explain what it means. I shall also explain how it impacts the selection of your CV. Okay, and then how you can avoid that with your CV. I'm also going to talk about applicant tracking systems, or ATS as they're more commonly known, what they are, why companies use them, how they get used by companies, how they affect our applications when we send our CVs in, and then how to get that applicant tracking system to work to our benefit. Okay. And then at the end, I've got some resources. I've done some research and found some useful websites that I've put in at the end as a link, and we'll be sharing this presentation with you so you can get those links for yourself. And then at the end, there are some questions, or there is a time slot for questions. So if you could keep your questions to the end, that's fine. If you have a burning desire to ask a question midway through, please let Emma know, and then we can answer that question. Okay, so first and foremost, your CV is your advert. It's your marketing tool. It's more important now, as we mentioned with the COVID situation. It's more important now than ever before to have one that stands out and one that sells you. Okay, you need to be and have a CV that shouts and screams to the recruiter, pick me, pick me, pick me. Okay. Once that recruiter has picked you and picked your CV and then does an interview with you, your interview is your time to shine and prove that everything that's on your CV is true, and your personality as well, and get that over and across to win the job. All right. But your CV is your marketing tool. It's no different from the Pepsi adverts. It's no different from the Toyota adverts. It's no different from the KFC adverts. It's the thing that makes a recruiter say, I want to buy this guy. And that's what you're in. You're in a sales environment. Okay. Your buyer is your recruiter. I found a really nice quote here from Leo Burnett, and it's actually related more to marketing, but I thought it was quite adapt for CV writing. And he simply says, make it simple, make it memorable, make it inviting to look at, make it fun, and make it easy to read. Okay. And I think if you think through this after we've gone through the various topics that we're going to discuss, you will come to agree and understand and see exactly what is meant by that. Okay. CV formats. This is just a generic format off the internet. Don't worry, this photograph, it's not anybody particular. But it's an idea of a layout. Okay. So CV formats. One of the things that I had to look at when I was initially made redundant is the availability of job roles in my chosen career path and my chosen industry. Now, I've spent 29 years working in hospitality, so it's quite difficult for me to change, especially based on my CV. I had to be very clever with my CV and come to a design, if you like, and a format where recruiters will not have the word hotel jump out at them, because that's the experience that I've got. And I need them to see that I'm actually good at HR in any industry, not just in the hospitality industry. And this is maybe something that you need to think about, and think about which of the three common formats suits your particular situation, okay? Now, if you work in an environment and in an industry where there are plenty of jobs available at the moment, or a good source of jobs available at the moment, where you have a good work history, then you might want to pick one of the three types over the other. So just to go through, you have chronological, which is the classical one, where your format that lists your work experience in order, starting with the most recent, okay? Obviously, this is around and including all of the usual bits and pieces, which we'll go through about your name and all this kind of stuff, okay? Then you have your functional CV, and this emphasizes your qualifications and your accomplishments instead of specific jobs. Now, I put a comment here saying this isn't recommended. The reason that this isn't recommended is because this is difficult for recruiters to read, and it's time consuming. They will not necessarily read everything you write about your qualifications and accomplishments, and will literally just skip to the page and the detail on wherever it is that's got your last jobs and where you've worked. And we'll look at the job titles and we'll kind of say, okay, I don't care. So for me, for example, and I'll use my CV as a prime example, showing that my last jobs has been HR director, HR manager, and I've worked in hotel. So when applying for a software company, if I had a functional CV, they wouldn't necessarily consider me, because they'd ignore the facts of all of the accomplishments that I've put in and the fact that I'm CIPD qualified and whatever else, and literally just look at the fact that I've worked in a hotel and say, okay, but she's never worked in software, we don't care. Okay. And then you have the hybrid version, which is a modern format, which is somewhere between the two. So you have the skills and highlights at the top before you have a detailed work history at the back and after those elements. Okay. Just to clarify, I do actually have a functional format CV, and I have my list of jobs that is limited, and it is on a 2-page document. But we shall see. It's been relatively successful. Anyway, so which format is the best? I've taken this infographic from one of the websites, which I'll refer to later, because I think it's quite a useful one for you to understand which of the types of formats is the most useful for which situation. And this is where you need to think about it and maybe start preparing more than one of the formats, okay? Maybe prepare a CV in all three, because depending upon which job you apply for, you ought to amend and adapt your CV and application for each of the jobs that you're applying for, each of the positions or the industry that you're applying, or this particular skills that you're being asked to display, or whatever it might be, okay? So if we look at chronological, this is best for those people whose work history is very closely related to the desired job. So if you are an administrative assistant and you have experience in the recent times as an admin assistant, and you are applying for a job in a company as an administration assistant, then you can retain with a chronological format. Functional is better for those who want to highlight their skills and people who are seeking a career change. So for the individuals who, like myself, are maybe branching out, looking to move into a different industry, or others who are maybe looking to make a change from sales into HR, something like this, then a functional CV would be better for that situation. And then hybrid. That is where people who have a mix of relevant skills and similar work experience, but maybe not direct links or direct experience, sort of like for like, can use a hybrid version. Moving on. Okay, what's the visible difference? I like this slide because you can actually see how it's set out, and you can actually see the differences as if you were a recruiter looking at these things, and you can actually understand for yourself what is what are the challenges. Okay, now these are very brief and they've got them at 1 page. I would suggest that a maximum length for any CV would be 2 to 3 pages, maximum 3 pages, not longer than this. Okay. If we look at the chronological on the left-hand side, it's quite easy and straightforward to be able to read that, for anybody to read it and see the job title, the company, where in the world they were, and then the dates that they were working there, so the length of service. You've then got staggered information, so the most recent company is the one that you give the most amount of information for, and then it gets slightly less, slightly less, slightly less as you move back in your history of employment, with then your education qualifications at the end. Okay. If we then look at the functional, it starts off with a skills summary. Okay, and this would be a executive summary that would come in at the beginning. Again, starting with your personal information, but then moving on to your professional achievements. Okay, now this is where my CV is somewhere in these lines, and I have, for example, I have functional skills mentioned as a title, and then I have listed bullet point achievements under that, which are professional accomplishments as you were. And then finally, literally just bullet point listed the work history with education. Okay. And the last one that we have, which is the hybrid on the right-hand side, where again, if you look through, it's slightly more difficult to actually see what somebody's done or where somebody's worked. Okay. You've got a very brief summary at the top. Underneath the personal details, you have the skills and accomplishments, followed by bullet points as the skill topics, what have you. One of the reasons I personally don't like the hybrid version is because there is a danger and a risk with the skills and accomplishments section for somebody to Google search a list of all the skills that are relative to their job and post them in there verbatim. So just copy and paste, whether or not they've actually got the skill, but this is what the company wants to receive. Okay. So I would be wary of doing that. Be super critical of yourself if you do choose to use this format. And when you're putting your skills and accomplishments, you don't need to have a massive list. You just need to have a few key ones that are the key elements for your position, for your industry, for your experience. Okay. This then follows through with the work experience. And again, like the first one, you have the most amount of information with the most recent, and then moving backwards in time. So those are the 3 normal structures for CVs. There are lots of variants on these out there, and depending upon who you talk to, if you talk to somebody like Nakari Golf with their CV and recruitment process, they'll teach you to do it a certain way. Other, schools will teach you to do it in slightly different ways, to have graphics, to have whatever else on it. But these are the cleanest and most neatest structures to have. Okay. Okay. So moving on. What do we need to include in a CV? Seems like really common sense, but there's certain stuff that I think everybody needs to put in a CV, and it's quite specific information. Okay, you need to think about your name and your contact details and your mobile and email address. Now make sure that these are legible, make sure that these are correct. So when you're doing your mobile, make sure that you include your area code or your country code, as well as the local code, so that people can contact you. They don't have to think, oh, he's in Azerbaijan, which means I need to add whatever it is for the country code for that. Okay, that means that the recruiter can literally just pick the CV up, the number, and dial it from their phone. They don't have to think where they are in the world. Email address. Now this is a really another very interesting one. Your email address has to be accurate on your CV, otherwise people are not going to be able to get in touch with you. But on top of this, we need to have a little bit of a think about our email addresses. When we're using things like Yahoo, Google, Gmail accounts, Hotmail accounts, and what have you, there is a tendency, especially if it is a personal email address, to have a funny or funky email address, okay? Like, I don't know, hotcrossbuns@gmail.com or something like this, okay? As a recruiter, and I speak as myself now, it makes me smile when I read these things, but I don't feel it's particularly professional. Now, if you are in a non-managerial or non-supervisory position, it's okay. You can keep that type of email address. I mean, there's so many options for free email addresses these days, and there's no limits to how many you can have. But if you're in a supervisory level or a management level position, I would strongly urge you to have a professional email address that you can use for this type of environment. Okay. Current location. This is important, particularly at this point in time. With the restrictions that we have with regards to travel in and out of countries, and I speak predominantly mostly for the GCC here, it is very difficult for people to hire from outside of the UAE, for example, or from Qatar, even Oman, for Kuwait. There is no possibility to hire anyone from another country because there are difficulties either with processing work permits. Visas are just not being issued in some countries, like in Kuwait, for example, or in Qatar. Alternatively, actually traveling to the new country is difficult. So getting approvals, because that still needs to happen in the UAE, to travel from India or the Philippines, even if you have a residence visa, is taking upwards of 8 to 10 weeks, if not more than this, with multiple requests being put through to the government responsible body for that. So don't be discouraged, but make sure that your current location is clearly marked on your CV so that the recruiters can make an educated choice about yourself and whether you'd be suitable for the role or not. Qualifications and certificates. It sounds like something very simple, but it's super important to make sure that you have all of that information on your CV. If you don't have any qualifications, don't worry, okay? If you're studying and currently studying, put that information on there, right? And put under process or put an expected graduation date, something like this, okay? Education details. Education at a tertiary level is important. At a primary and secondary level is not really important. Once you get past the age of 19, it really doesn't matter where you went to junior school, okay? But if you don't have any tertiary qualifications, and by tertiary qualifications, I'm talking about a degree, a diploma, or something that you would have studied after school, okay? So once you finished your schooling, then if you don't have those, then just put limit what you have, okay? So put that you passed with a baccalaureate or whatever it may be, A-levels, that's fine as well, and put that information on. And then last but not least, your work experience. And I will come on to talking about work experience in a little bit more detail in a short while, okay? Other things that we need to include, as we've mentioned, there's the skills and competencies, okay? This gives you the chance to highlight what you're good at and make sure that you have the keywords from the job description. Now, I will reinforce here again, only add them if you've done them, if you have them, okay? Do not put in it that you're a master sushi chef if you've never touched a sushi knife or made a sushi roll in your life. You will get caught out, and when you get caught out, you will lose your job, and that's the job that you've worked really hard to achieve, and that will be a real shame, okay? And then what's called an executive summary, okay? This is literally, as we've mentioned with the formats that we've talked about already, this is literally a brief paragraph. It should not be more than a third of a page, at absolute maximum, with normal font size and normal margins, right? You're looking at maybe 5 to 7 lines, upwards to 10 maximum of a summary. Okay, and it needs to make sense. It needs to read nicely. It's not just spitting out all the competencies, all the buzzwords about who you are and what you can do. Personally, I don't have an executive summary. It is open for discussion. It is something that is debated long and hard in many forums, and if you get into discussion with any CV writers on LinkedIn, they will tell you that you must have one. Personally, as a recruiter, I don't have one on my CV, and I don't have one on my CV because I know when I'm recruiting, I don't read it, okay? Because it isn't the truth of the person. I would get more of the truth of the person through a telephone call than I would do of what's written on there, okay? But this is up to you. Please just, feel free to put an executive summary if you'd like. Okay, let's move on to talking about work experience. And this is why I said we come on to this in a little bit more detail. Job titles. Every company, or many companies, have very straightforward, streamlined job titles. So you would go from being an administrative assistant in one company to administrative assistant in another. Other companies, the more dynamic companies and funky companies, will come up with fancy terminology. For example, happiness monitor, or as I've had in one company I worked in, they called and this is part of the branding for the company, but they called the HR department magicians. Now, for those of us who work in HR, we know we are magicians, but if I put on my CV that I was head magician, everybody would think I've been up on stage with Siegfried and Roy and trying to make a tiger vanish, which is sometimes what I feel like I'm doing at work, but it's not the truth of the job that I've done. Okay, you're 9 times out of 10, your recruiter is not going to ask you to prove the jobs that you've held. Okay, they may ask for a confirmation of employment, a certificate of employment from your previous company. Okay, if you have that for the last company and you want to retain the title that you had there, but it doesn't follow with other titles that you've held, put it in brackets, okay? So put chief magician in brackets, HR director, for example. So when you have your certificate of employment, it says, yes, Sarah was the chief magician. The recruiter can look at that certificate, balance it with your CV so it matches, but they also understand on first glance of your CV, which is the important glance of your CV, which positions you've held, okay? Responsibilities. Writing the same job details for each job title is going to be boring and tedious for anybody to read, and they're going to skim read it and they're going to miss stuff. So if you're someone who has held the same type of role in multiple companies over a number of years, you don't have to detail everything that you've done the same, okay? So if we take, and I apologize, but I will just take HR again. If we take HR and my job title as HR manager or HR director, I've done recruitment and interviews in every single job, but do I need to write it in every single job? No. If I'm applying for an HR director's role, it would be understood and given that that's part of the job and that I know what I'm doing and I ought to know what I'm doing, okay? So I would write the elements of the job, of each job, that are different, okay? So if there's anything exceptional, I give an example. In the UK, generally, companies do not provide accommodation and transportation for their employees, generally. So I would not have any responsibility as HR for that. In the UAE, however, as many of you will understand and know, and hopefully still be living in staff accommodation is provided. So as a HR, I would be responsible for the accommodation of the staff of the company. Well, that would be an additional responsibility different to what I would have in a UK position. So that would be the element that I would retain, okay? You don't need to give all the ins and outs. You need to just give a brief bullet point, and please highlight any unusual ones, the ones that are an added extra, okay? Something that's not normal for that role. And please do not copy and paste the company job descriptions. I've had some recent CVs that have been upwards of 8 or 9 pages long because for every company they've worked in, they've pasted their job description. And as we all know, those of us in HR and job descriptions, we don't make them short and sweet. We make them long and complicated. So if you've got a job description in your CV, it's too long, okay? Pick out the key elements for it and put that in. Excuse me. Then we come on to the company name. Now, we work in a global environment and we are applying for roles in potentially different countries or different states within a country, and even within some of the bigger countries within different cities. And not every recruiter knows every company around the world. We don't want to have to force the recruiter to do a quick Google search when he's screening your CV to understand who the company is. It's better to give them an idea of size and information about the company as bullet point information on your CV. It makes it quick and easy. The other thing as well is that when you give this type of information, it actually validates the job that you've been doing. So if you tell them that I'm the office manager for a company XYZ, but don't tell them what company XYZ is, they may understand from the title of office manager that you've got 25 or 30 people in the office, when in actual fact you've only got 1 or 2, or vice versa. Okay, so consider whether the company name is known. Consider also the most, what I would call familiar name for the company. Okay, if we were to talk about Arcadia in the UK, we wouldn't know what it is. If we were to talk about Alshire over here, we would know what it is, but in the UK they wouldn't have a clue. So you need to think about what would be known locally, okay? And give a little bit of information. How far back to include? Okay, this is a tricky one. Now, generally, the advice is not to include much more than 10 years on your CV, okay? If you have less than that, you go back as far as whatever experience you've got. However, you need to make a judgment and say that, for example, if you used to work for a company that you're reapplying to and it's just outside of 10 years, maybe you need to include it. And how to include it. If you remember going back to the different types of CV that we had bullet point, we had the different elements of the work experience where the farther back in time, the less information you put. So you could actually go back that far and literally just do a one line of job title, company, dates to and from, okay? If you need to include, but I wouldn't put necessarily lots of detail, okay? You can include that information, for example, in a cover letter, right? Just to make sure that it gets picked up. If you are a student in your apprenticeships or you're doing an internship, include all relevant experience. If it's part-time, evenings, casual work, or whatever you've done, detail what you've achieved in the roles, what you've learned, and mention the status or type of position. Help the recruiter understand that this is an internship whilst you were studying here, so they don't have to fit it all together and do a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, and that's what quite a lot of interns forget to tell you, and they make it look like it's a full-time position and it's not. Okay, they also, if you're just starting out and you've done maybe some work experience and you've done some internships and then you're in full-time employment, if you highlight and identify with an explanation that this is an internship, it helps the recruiter understand that better. Otherwise, they can look at that and look at the length of time and say, oh, but they're job hop, they're only 6 months. Okay. A good recruiter will look a bit further. Not all of them do. And with the number and volume of CVs that they're receiving at the moment, they're not going to do that, if I'm honest. Okay? And I don't blame them. But you need to make sure you highlight it and make sure it's as clear as possible. Okay, how to write on your CV, tasks and achievements. So we would normally say, I changed the light bulb. Quite easy, straightforward. But a better way to write it, especially if you're going to put it on your CV, would be, I single-handedly managed the successful upgrade and deployment of a new environmental illumination system with 0 cost overruns and no safety incidents. Okay? So it just sounds a bit better, it sounds a bit polished, right? The only thing I would say about that one is that it doesn't have a timeline on it. So it doesn't tell you whether it actually did it within a certain timeline and you achieved that target. Okay. I've got some help for you on this because that's quite complicated. There's something called the STAR acronym, which is situation, task, action, and result. Okay. And this will help you when you're doing your interviews as well. All right. First thing to think about is describe the situation, is the S, the problem, the challenge, the project, or the obstacle you were faced with. The T is task, describe what was required of you. The A is action, list the actions that you took. And then the R is the results. Describe the results you helped to obtain and the benefit to your employer and quantify these in dollars or percentage or pounds or lira or rupees or whatever it may be. Okay. And it can be quantified in time. It can be quantified in percentages. It can be quantified in marks out of 10. It can be quantified in financial, fiscal numbers like money. It can be turnover ratios, anything like this that you can think of as to how you can quantify what you've done. If we think about, and everybody, I know everyone sits there and is concerned about where to start with this, because this is a massive task. Get yourself a blank Excel spreadsheet or a piece of paper, okay, and make one column or do one piece of paper for each of the S, T, A, and R. And sit and think about the jobs that you've worked in and sit and think about the tasks that you've done, okay? And was this just a day-to-day task, or was this a task as a result of something that happened? Did you have a problem that you resolved by doing this task, or what was the problem? So you write it backwards. Don't try and fill in all the columns immediately. Just sit and brainstorm and try and fill in as much as possible and spend half an hour. Do it half an hour every day, and you will gradually build up a bank of information, right? And then start thinking around how you can quantify what you've done with those tasks and the actions that you've taken, okay? This then can help you when you're in an interview as well, because if you have an interview and you're questioned about something that you've done at work, can you give me an example of a time when there was a problem in the office? You've got a whole list of them to think about, and which one is most suitable, okay? So it's excellent preparation for your interviews. It's also excellent on your CV, and the more that you can think of, the more you have the opportunity to tweak your CV to fit the job that you're applying for. Okay, here's a couple of examples. So this gives the person reading your CV something to measure your achievements by. I grew a team of account specialists from 4 to 20 in less than 8 months, resulting in a 230% increase in revenue collections and a decrease in late payments by over $365,000 in 1 quarter. Okay. Or an alternative, I hired to fulfill new customer orders, track inventory shipments, answer billing questions, and manage payments via inbound instant message, chat, and phone in a 200-person call center. Okay. Now, it's quite wordy, but if you don't need lots and lots of these, you just need maybe one really good one for each job that you've done. Okay. Or if you're using the functional CV, you need to identify this which of the skills they display and group them according to the skills on that format. Okay. Now, other important points, and I'm going to run through this a little bit quickly, but they're all very, very important. Choose a legible font. Okay. Make sure it's readable. Something like Arial, Times New Roman, or Calibri are the most common fonts that people use. Don't use any fancy colors or styles. Don't do any sort of block work or any of these sort of shading or shadows or anything like this, or gradients of colors or whatever, even on the titles. Okay. Use black or dark blue when you're putting your CV together. It gives the most amount of contrast on white paper when it's printed and against your computer screens when people are looking at it on screen. This is coming from a visibility point of view, okay? If people can't read your CV, or it's hard and difficult for them to actually read it because the font is wrong, or the color is wrong, or the design is messy, they're not going to spend time. Especially now with 100, 200 CVs, they're not going to spend time, regardless of whether it gets through the next point, which is the applicant tracking system. Font size, minimum of 10-point fonts. Do not go smaller than that, okay? And then a maximum of 12 points. Too small is too difficult to read, and too big, and it just looks like you're filling the page. If you only have a one-page CV, you only have a one-page CV. It's not a problem, okay? It's not a competition as who has the longest. You're looking at a maximum of 2 to 3 pages, okay? Make sure that your font size, color, and type are consistent through the whole document. If you don't, it looks messy. So you make sure that all of your bullet points are lined up in a row. You make sure that all of your section heads are the same font, the same size, all through, everything, okay? I suggest you type everything out first of all, and then that's one of the last things that you cross-check, okay? Capitalize things correctly. It helps people read. People read words, especially quickly on CVs, on signage, by the shape of the words. So they look for the capitals, they look for the stick letters like L, D, T, stuff like this, okay? If you put a sign in capital letters, if you put a header in capital letters, people find it difficult to read. And this is scientific. Some of this has come from training that I've done with regards to visually impaired individuals and improving signage and accessibility for them in hotel and hospitality environments, okay? If we want people to read our CVs, we need to make sure that it's quick and easy, okay? And that when they do that quick, easy thing, they understand it as well. Okay, formatting. Section titles, use the same font. Use half a font size larger. Use like 11.5, okay? It doesn't matter. But don't overemphasize. They don't need to be bold and underlined and italic and shadow. They just need to be slightly bigger, slightly darker, and identified. And the reason you need these titles is also for the applicant tracking systems as well, okay? Be consistent with your titles and with your document layouts. Use bullet points, okay? Then you don't have to have proper English paragraphs. You can just have a bullet point, but use a basic dot similar to what I've used here, but retain the same dot throughout the whole document, okay? And use the auto formatting option in Word. Set up your margins so that every time you use it, it comes in the same line and it's not all over the place. You're not having to mess around with your tab button and your spaces. I've been there. It's a pain in the ass, but it makes your document look very messy as well. Okay, grammar and spelling. English is not everybody's first language. And I'm not necessarily just talking about producing a CV in English here. This can be in any language. Please use the automation systems that are available. On Word documents, they have hundreds of languages that it can do grammar and spelling and spell checks in. Use it. Please decide on which language for your document and set it as a default. And I say this because within Word, there are multiples. So if I take English because this is the one I have problems with. I had problems because I was taught to spell in America, but grew up in England. So I still don't know which is correct. Some words, and I rely on my Word documents to help me a lot and the spell check there, okay, to make sure. You decide on whether you're going to use English US or English UK, and then make sure that it's appropriate, okay? And I put 2 examples of that there. Both of those are correct, but in different countries. And I'm not going to tell you which one it is. You have to figure that out for yourselves. Okay, finally, and I can't stress this enough, proofread, 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 and then print it and read it again, okay? I found out this week only, because I printed my CV for the first time in a little while, that when I printed my CV, after I'd made some changes to it, my name dropped off the top. And I've been sending this out to people, so I'm speaking from experience. Print it, read it, make sure it makes sense, make sure it looks nice visually, get other people to have a look at it. put it away, come back to it in an hour's time or in a couple of hours or the next day or whatever. Ask other people's opinion on it. If you can make friends with a recruiter, if you get a rejection, ask them, how was my CV? Have you got any constructive hints and tips? And see if they can give you any feedback. Okay? Now, we're coming on, and I'm going to run over on time, and I'm sorry, but this is important. We've got 2 more sections to get through. Humans, on average, make one decision every 2.5 seconds, which is crazy, okay? Now, if you're a recruiter and you are making decisions every 2.5 seconds over a pile of CVs, it's important that the information on those CVs is correct and is what they want to see. Now, this leads me into a topic called subconscious bias. Your subconscious bias is an automatic mental shortcut used to process information quickly and make decisions. And I have a picture of 2 very simple things there, which is 2 apples, one green and one red. Based on your personal experience, just sit and think, what do you expect the green apple to be like? What do you expect the red apple to be like? Okay? I'm not going to tell you mine because that would change your opinions potentially. But if it was the opposite and you only knew from biting into it, that would be you've chosen one over the other. So let's say you choose the red apple because you want a sweet, soft, fluffy apple, and it's not. Well, you've made an unconscious bias, a subconscious bias decision based on your experiences and information that's been provided to you, okay? How to avoid it in our CVs. Now, in many countries, there's legislation, even in the UAE, there is such legislation in place to protect candidates from a bias, okay, or what can be otherwise termed as discrimination, right? And I don't like using the D word because it is a big word and it's a nasty, horrible word, but it happens. And I'm sorry that it happens, but it does. I can't change everyone. I try. But you need to help yourself not be discriminated against, which means you need to think about the information you're providing on your CV to help the recruiter not make a subconscious bias decision from their point of view. Okay? So, in those countries where it is illegal to discriminate, there is no legal requirement to put the following information on your CV. However, in many countries, it is habit to put it on your CV, okay? You don't need it. Dates or years of education. You don't need to say from this year to this year. You can just put the date that you graduated. Your marital and family status. Yes, at some point in the conversation, if you are successful, there will be a discussion over that, especially in the Middle East, where you are potentially provided with extra visas, flight tickets, and medical insurance based on your status. However, it doesn't matter and should not matter what situation you are to be hired. Your gender. Doesn't matter if you're male or female, neither is better than the other, and both can do the jobs equally well. Okay, the only time that somebody theoretically should ask for a specific gender is if it is a requirement for the job. For example, a nurse in a maternity suite in the Middle East would have to be, or in a local hospital, would have to be female, okay, because of the religious issues around it. Nationality and passport details. These are not needed on your CV. These can be figured out at a later date, okay? And through interview as well, to understand if they can get a visa for you or not. Family information, putting down the name of your parents and their professions, it's not required. And finally, a photograph. A photograph is probably one of the most dangerous things to put on your CV because it's automatically a pictorial indication of allowing somebody to make a subconscious bias decision, okay? One of the other comments and other issues that we have is with regard to language skills. Please detail your language skills on your CV if you have them, right? Do not use the word mother tongue or the term mother tongue. Use fluent, okay? Use basic, intermediate, advanced, elementary, fluent, you know, those kind of terms that are nondescript. They don't imply that you've learnt English because you are English, or you've learned Hindi because you are Indian, okay? One of the other things that we need to be conscientious about, especially in this day and age, especially with the digital spread of information, there are an awful lot of people out there who are stealing other people's identities and are creating personas online, bank accounts, you name it, okay, and creating identity theft. By providing information that I've put here on your CVs, if this gets into the wrong hands, and believe me, there are some unscrupulous people who use recruitment websites wrong and database wrong, and for this exact purpose, but you are opening yourself up to the risk of identity theft. So it is from a security perspective as well, okay? Additionally, some of these elements are asked for password prompts on certain websites and things. One of the most common ones is, what's your parents' maiden name? What's your location? Where were you born? Where did you go to school? If that's all on your CV, it can be very easy for people to guess it or to research it and source that information. Applicant tracking systems. Okay, this is a hot topic and a bane of many people's lives. I will go through a little bit about what they are, how they work, and what it means for your CV, okay, and why sometimes they don't help us, but also how we can help ourselves to make sure that the applicant tracking system helps us. Applicant tracking system. So I'm sure for many of you who have been online recently and have been applying for jobs, when you get linked through to from any of the websites, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Bait.com, Indeed, Total Jobs, any of these, and it takes you through to the company website, and you have to create a whole profile. It could be using Zoho, it could be using Taleo, it could be using any number of products. Success factors, for example, things like this, okay? You will surely, some of you will recognize those names. These are all applicant tracking systems, applicant management systems. And essentially from the recruiter's point of view, basically what they will do is they will create a job description and a recruitment, a vacancy, and that's just in that system on their side, and that will then post that to the market and put it out on the websites. The websites will redirect back into that system for people to apply, and we'll ask them to upload their CVs and fill in some questions and details, and we'll do something called parsing, okay? Now, parsing is basically where the computer will look for what's written in the job description, any other identifying information, for example, your first name, your family name, your contact number, things like this, and what's on your CV, and will basically pay match, okay? So the system passes and says, I need the person's first name, scan, 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 oh, there it is, it's Sarah, okay? And it will look in certain places for that information. So it will look in at the top of or the bottom of the document for that information. If it's not there, it won't fill it in. And I'm sure that when you are filling in these and making applications online and you upload your CV and it says, well, your name doesn't give you your name because it tells you it can't find it. Okay. It's a really good indication that maybe something's not right. Okay. There are knockout questions, and I've used recruitment tracking systems or ATS systems in the past, and you have identified, sort of key questions that if somebody answers no to or answers incorrectly, then their CV is automatically rejected. Okay. It's not ideal. It's not perfect. It's not something that I like doing, but from a recruitment perspective, if I have one vacancy and 600 applications, it makes it really easy to do a long list of from the 600 down to 400 maybe, or down to 300 because these people haven't answered the right question or don't fill the right criteria, okay? So whilst it upsets me because I'm on the receiving end as much now as well as being having been on the other side, I do understand why it's done, and I think we all need to be aware of that. Don't lie either. Even if you know it is a knockout question, don't give the wrong answer. Okay, if it asks you for a degree and you don't have one, don't tick yes because that's what you want. You think they know they want. Okay, because when they're not going to look, they will look at the answers to the questions and it says yes, they will look at your CV and say, but he doesn't have one. Okay, so he was dishonest, and they will disregard your CV, right? And that's not what you want to happen, okay? Okay, how can we beat this system? Tailor your resume to the job description. We mentioned about keywords before. We mentioned about your executive summary and your skills and achievements. So make sure that these all fit what is in the job description. Use long form and acronym versions of keywords. I will give you an example. Using the word human resources as well as the acronym HR in multiple places in my CV means that the system will pick it up more frequently. Do not use tables and columns, okay? Don't use Word text boxes on a Word document, right? It knocks out the system. If you use graphics and photos, which is point number 9 here, it knocks out the system. Don't put logos on for your company. Don't put fancy stuff on. Have 2 versions of your CV is the best way. Have one if you really want to have one that stands out. And I've seen some really epic examples that are absolutely fabulous of nicely presented, informative CVs that have not gone through an ATS, that if they did go through an ATS would not be read. And when I say would not be read, it would not pick up information, and because the format of the document is not correct, it would say, reject. Okay? So, long form acronym versions of keywords. Use chronological or hybrid resume formats, going back to the beginning of the workshop, those elements that we've mentioned. Don't use tables or columns. Use a screen-friendly traditional font, as we've mentioned, with sensible sizes and things. This advice is not to use headers and footers. Headers and footers, we use them to try and squeeze a bit more space out of our A4 page. But if your name is in the header or the footer, and when you apply for jobs and your name repeatedly doesn't come up, take that as a hint. It's not reading that information. You need to put it in the body of the CV, okay? You remember we were talking about the standard resume section headings and making sure they're formatted properly and detail is there. The system reads it. The system will look for the word qualifications and then find your degree written under it, or your school history written under it, okay? And as we've said, don't use graphics or photos. And for the purpose of an applicant tracking system, so Taleo, SuccessFactors, things like this, save it in a Word document, okay? Because the system reads it more easily than a PDF. Not all of them use and accept PDF formats, okay? Resources, we're nearly finished. We can get on to questions very soon, okay? I've gone and done some research online for myself, but also for the purpose of this workshop, to find some websites with fantastic lists of keywords, skills and achievements that you can pick up and use, okay? So there's 4 bullet points there with links, and when we share this, the links are embedded in the presentation, so you'll be able to get go directly to the pages. There's loads of information out there with regards to this, and please use Google, okay? Please Google key skills for and put your job title, okay? And it will direct you to links and websites where this information is presented for you. It's not rocket science to pick it up. Now, one of the other things that I would strongly recommend you to do, because I did it and it really seriously opened my eyes as to the fact that my CV was not hitting the nail on the head, okay? I went to a website called JobScan and set up an account, and JobScan is basically, it's an ATS dummy kind of setup, right? But it's for recruiters, like independent recruiters, not through companies, but it's also for people like you and me who are looking for a job and want to know how good is my CV. And you can upload your CV and you can benchmark it and run it against job descriptions. So either one that you know, for example, the last job that you did, that you know that you did really well and you did all of the tasks and everything that's there, well, run your CV against the job description for that job, or any of the others that are posted, maybe the ones that you're applying for. Don't be disheartened, though, with the results. it gives you a percentage score match. And when I first did mine, my percentage score match was about 30%, which for those of us who are brought up well and with a competitive streak, you need 100%. So I was really upset by this. And I literally went back and started from scratch. I pulled out a blank piece of paper and went to start my CV all over again. And this is where I've done the research previously and come up with these hints and tips, because this is what I looked for in my CV. And I printed off the results of the job description and the report that comes, because they're quite detailed. When you sign up, I think you get something like 13 scans for free, which is brilliant. If you've got more than one email address, sign up on every email address and get quite a few. You can pay for membership. I don't remember how much it is. It's not too expensive. If you're going to be doing it regularly, it might be worth to do that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing it for every single job, but at least, infrequently, to make sure you're on the right track. And if you're rewriting your CV, it's a good place to start. It gives you details, specific details of this word is in your CV or in the job. This word is in your CV, but it's not in the job description. This word's in the job description, but it's not in your CV. And this skill is mentioned in the job description, but it's not in your CV, and things like this. Now, one of the things that you need to remember, okay, is that the applicant tracking system is a computer. It reads words at face value. It does not read the intention behind a word. So if you put common skill or I managed, okay, it's not going to infer from that skills is plural or that you were a manager. Okay, you need, if the job description says there should be the word manager, that is the variant that it will look for in your CV, and that can be quite tricky. I, as a draft, as a trial run, I went completely overboard and took from the job description and I took the report point by point and put all of the words and elements that it said it was missing into my CV, and then ran it through the scan again. And I still only managed to get 80%, but still I went from 30 to 80. But when I read that CV, it sounded like somebody had just literally copy and pasted from the job description, and it didn't really make logical sense. It didn't read well. It wasn't me. It wasn't friendly. It was honest. It still is skills that I had, but it just was like, okay, this is not a good CV. This is not making me want to read it. And if we go back to the quote at the beginning, it's not fun to read. It's not inviting. So I settled with having a 60% achievement. Okay, I think I came to 63 or 64% in the end, but I'm happy and comfortable and confident with the versions of the CV that I've got. Right, so I strongly recommend that you have a look. The link is there, it's underlined, it'll be there in the presentation for you. So please go and please do have a go at that. Okay. One other thing I would point out and comment on is the fact that I have written a couple of articles on LinkedIn on my profile about artificial intelligence and the use of it in recruitment, whether it's there or not, and also about writing CV and a little bit of humor along the way about writing CVs and how to achieve it, and the sort of story that I have and the journey that I've had. So that's basically come to the end. We're at 10 minutes over and I apologize. I'm okay for time. If anybody wants to ask any questions, please let me know. I will just unshare or drop out of the presentation so I can see the comments and questions from Emma.
Hi, Sarah. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Hi, Sarah. There were a couple of questions down the side from someone called Ibrahim.
Okay.
Questions early on. He put a question about the achievements. Would it be considered if my achievements were basically my job description? So his achievements being the primary part of the job description.
One second. There we go. So to be honest, Ibrahim, thank you for your question. Providing your achievements, I mean, a recruiter is not going to have the job description there to be able to say, but he's just going to, okay? but you need to be honest in what you're writing in your CV is actually what you've done. Okay?
Something's wrong with the sound. Okay.
Can you hear me?
I'll go off. I'll go turn my mic off.
Okay. Is that better, Ibrahim? So awesome. Okay. I think Emma and I are sat a little bit too close together. Okay. So you can use your job description. It's a really good idea to use your job description as a source of information for your achievements. Okay. But if your achievement is, you need to just think about it and say, okay, I'm not sure what sort of work experience you have and what background you're in, but your achievement needs to be based around what you actually did. Okay. Now, job descriptions usually are 4 or 5 pages long, and there's lots of stuff that's in there because it might not be everything it might not be the stuff that you do every day, but it will be most of the bits and pieces that you do, if that makes sense. So there may be something written in your job description that you do once every 3 weeks, and then the other things that you do every day. All right. So you can take it, but I think you need to just tweak them to make sure that you adjust them according to actually what you've done, Ibrahim. Does that help? And I see it's not about Word having more chances than PDF, okay? It's to do with the applicant tracking system, the computer software, and the way that works. Not all computer softwares can read or access the information in PDFs properly or clearly. So the fault is not necessarily with you and your CV and the way your file, but with the software that they're using. So, and you won't know. Okay, there's no error that comes back to you that says I can't read this. It just accepts the document. And I'm as bad. I use PDF often as well, and have to correct myself and go back and change it into a Word document and upload a Word document. Okay, so it just means that the information is going to be extracted from the document more easily if it's in Word. And yes, definitely amend your CV according to the job description. That should be done. You don't necessarily need to start from scratch every time, but if you have that database of accomplishments and achievements, like we mentioned with the star structure, then you can just pull from that as you need to every time you change your CV. Okay. And you've got, what about the organization culture? Based on that, I can use wording that triggers for them. Yes, again, as long as it's applicable to the experience that you've got. Okay. What's the best way to put this? Okay. It's not about, when a recruiter reads a CV where someone has gone on the website from a company and pulled the values and then worked the values into their CV terminology and things like this, it's actually quite obvious. Okay, so it can seem disingenuous, it can seem not true. And whilst it may be that actually, yes, you do work with honesty, you do work with integrity, or whatever other values that company may have, because you've done everything you can to kind of work it into your CV, quite often it can seem that it's not true. And we know that's not the case, but that's how it could be read and understood by a recruiter. Okay. So do we have any other?
Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you, Sarah. Yep. That was really insightful. I think it was necessary for you to go over a little bit because of the amount of information that you had to cover. There's one little more question. Would you mind to go?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't mind. Just to answer Ibrahim's question about manually sifting CVs. A lot of companies still do that. And this is one of the reasons that you need to make sure your CV is easy to read and gives them the information straight away. Okay, it's because they don't necessarily have a lot of time, and it can be because of the bulk of applications that they receive. right? As I mentioned, I've done recruitment to help out colleagues over the last few months. And when I've received CVs, it's been a bulk of 200 or 300. And that's for a vacancy that wasn't even posted online. That was just through word of mouth. It's really intimidating as a recruiter to have to go through 200 or 300 CVs. And the only people I could pull out were the ones who go, okay, this one's not in the UAE, so I can't hire it. And literally took out like 20%, if that, because they didn't fit the job, or they didn't have the qualification, and they didn't have the location. Other than that, everybody was a perfect fit, which made it really difficult. So this is why you've got to have your sales tool. You've got to have your marketing tool, okay? And it's got to sell you. Sabika, your question about internship or work experience is not relevant to the position. No, always include it. Include it in a way that you've got, include it in a way that you've got transferable skills. Every work that you do teaches you something, okay? My first work experience when I was 16 years old was in Marks and Spencer's, and I did 3 weeks work experience. 1 week I spent in the food department, 1 week I spent in menswear, and 1 week I spent in ladies' wear, okay? And what did I learn from that? Well, I learned about customer service. I learned about dealing with people of different ages, about communication. I learned about how important that may be for some elderly individuals, that 1 week shopping trip, once a week shopping trip is so important. Now, how is that relevant to the job that I do now? Well, it's really relevant. It's about communication. It's about people. It's about customer service. It's about understanding human behavior. Okay, so really think analytically about the internship and the work experience you've done, and the working environment, the interrelationships you had with other people, the communication, not just the simple tasks. I mean, I don't know what job you did, but it's not just about, shuffling paper or filing or, something like this, which to be often occasions that's what interns do. Think about the learning experiences that you had and put that into it as your skills that you come away with from that experience. But never, especially if you don't have a vast amount of work experience, like full-time uneducation related work experience, always include your internships.
I'll leave it there. Thank you, Sarah. You're going to be running another workshop next month, I think, on LinkedIn profiles. So for those of you who are interested to join then as well, that will all be marketed, so you'll be able to see that. This video is saved to the HR forum, so for those of you that joined late, or if you think you've got friends or colleagues that would be interested to understand this as well, then please go through to the forum and you'll be able to access the video there from tomorrow. So thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much to everyone who attended as well. Okay, bye, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.